I'm Natalie Brooks, 28, and I'm a social worker in Portland. My 9 to 5, at least on paper, is working with at-risk youth at a community center. In reality, it's more like 8 to whenever a crisis ends. My job is listening to scared kids, angry teenagers, exhausted parents, holding all their stories and trying to make sure none of them fall through the cracks. You'd think the person I love most would see that as a strength. My boyfriend Caleb calls it exhausting. Caleb is 26, freelance graphic designer. Works from our dining room table most days, headphones on, obsessing over tiny changes in fonts and color palettes for small businesses who pay late and want one more revision. When we first met at a gallery opening last year, the word exhausting never came up. He was magnetic, creative, loose, a little chaotic in a way that felt refreshing. He made fun of pretentious art descriptions, whispered jokes in my ear, and bought me a cheap beer instead of something I couldn't pronounce. I remember thinking, finally, someone who likes that I care too much. Those first months were easy. We stayed up late dissecting movies, sending each other memes, sharing playlists. He said things like, "You're so emotionally tuned in, Nat. It's like you see straight through people." He said it like it was a compliment. I cling to that memory sometimes, like proof that I didn't imagine the good parts. It wasn't until we started spending more nights together that the phrase showed up. At first it was soft, almost reasonable. One night, maybe 6 months in, I came home from work at the center, brain buzzing, heart heavy. A kid had a panic attack in my office after a visit from his dad. Another had run away for 24 hours before we found her at her friend's house. Nothing catastrophic, just another day in the life of social services, but my body was carrying it. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag, and leaned in the doorway where Caleb was sketching at his iPad. "How was your day?" he asked without looking up. I laughed once, the humorless kind. "Honestly, rough. Marcus had a blow-up with his mom again. He keeps saying he's done trying, and I don't know how to keep him engaged when she just—" "Natalie," he cut in, finally glancing at me. His expression was tight. "Can we not? Not right now?" I froze. "Oh, yeah, sure. Just too much?" He sighed, like I'd confirmed the right answer on a test. "It's just hearing about all that heavy stuff after a long day, it exhausts me. I need lighter energy at night, you know?" I told myself it made sense. Not everyone wants to hear about trauma at the dinner table. I apologized. Actually said, "Sorry, I'm exhausting," with a little laugh, like I was in on the joke. He smiled again. Problem solved. So I adjusted. The next week, I came home and swallowed my stories. When he asked how my day was, I said, "Fine, busy. How was yours?" in my best breezy voice. I aimed for light energy, whatever that meant. He perked up immediately. "Oh, it was good. The yoga studio finally approved the logo concept. Took them long enough." I listened. I asked questions. "What color palette did they end up liking? Did that new client ever get back to you?" After maybe 5 minutes of me gently probing, trying to show interest, he set his tablet down and rubbed his temples. "You're exhausting me with all these questions, Nat." I blinked. "Questions?" "Yeah, like, why do you need every detail?" His voice was flat, irritated. "I just want to decompress without, I don't know, an interrogation." Interrogation. I swallowed the sting. Tried to hear a reasonable request buried somewhere underneath. "Okay," I said quietly. "I was just trying to be engaged. But if you want space, I can give you space." I pulled back again. After that, I tried a different strategy. Do my own thing when I get home. Let him come to me. I'd change into leggings, start a load of laundry, scroll mindlessly on my phone in the bedroom, or chop vegetables for dinner, waiting to see if he'd initiate conversation. He didn't, not really. But a week later, as we lay in bed scrolling in silence, he sighed dramatically. "I feel like you're distant lately," he muttered. My stomach flipped. "Distant how?" "You just kind of disappear into yourself. You don't ask about my day anymore. You're not as present. It's like you're here, but you're not here." I stared at the ceiling, counting the tiny glow-in-the-dark stars the previous tenant had left. "If I talk about my day, it's exhausting," I said slowly. "When I ask about yours, it's exhausting. When I give you space, I'm distant. I'm trying to figure out what you actually want from me." He rolled onto his side to face me. "I just want you to be less intense," he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Sometimes you're a lot, Natalie. That's all I'm saying." "Be less," I translated silently. It landed somewhere deep, somewhere old. Growing up, my mom's depression was like a third parent in the house. Silent, heavy, always present. Even as a kid, I learned to read her mood the moment she walked into a room. I learned to lower my voice, shrink my feelings, not add anything to the weight she was already carrying. "Don't start, Nat," she'd say whenever I cried too long. "I'm already tired. You're exhausting me." I hear my mother's voice when Caleb says it. It's part of why it burrows under my skin so easily. A few months later, the phrase had become a regular thing. I'd come home, read his body language, and still somehow get it wrong. One Tuesday, I found him curled on the couch, staring at his phone with his jaw clenched. "Hey," I said gently, toeing off my boots. "You okay? You look tense." He didn't look up. "I'm fine." "Are you sure? You seem upset. Want to talk about—" "Natalie, can you just leave me alone?" His voice snapped through the room like a rubber band. "You asking me what's wrong all the time exhausts me. Not everything is about you trying to fix it." I flinched. I wasn't trying to fix anything, I was just checking in. "Well, don't. I need to sit with my feelings without you hovering." Hovering, interrogating, exhausting. A whole glossary of ways to tell me I'm wrong for caring. That night, I lay awake listening to him breathe beside me, eyes burning in the dark. My brain took inventory. Talking about my day? Exhausting. Asking about his? Exhausting. Giving space? Distant, which somehow loops back to exhausting. There didn't seem to be a version of me that wasn't too much. "Dude, this isn't normal," Alex said one afternoon. Alex is my roommate. Well, technically, I started off as his roommate. When Caleb and I got serious, I basically turned into a part-time resident at Caleb's apartment. But my official address and half my plants still live with Alex. He'd noticed the way I moved around the apartment lately, like the air itself was fragile. The way I paused before answering my phone if Caleb's name flashed on the screen. We were sitting at our tiny kitchen table, Alex stirring sugar into his coffee while I picked listlessly at a stale muffin. "What do you mean not normal?" I asked, already defensive. He gave me that long, assessing look he saves for when I'm clearly lying to myself. "You're walking around like you're afraid to breathe wrong," he said. "Every time Caleb texts, you tense up like a kid called to the principal's office. And don't give me the relationships are hard speech. I know you. This is different." He says I'm exhausting a lot," I admitted, staring at my thumbnail. The word sounded small out loud, watered down. Alex's eyebrows shot up. "A lot? Like how often?" "I don't know," I shrugged. "Sometimes, when I overshare, or when I ask too many questions, or when I forget to give him space, or when I trailed off, realizing how long the list had become. Alex leaned back in his chair. "Nat, you realize that's messed up, right? You're allowed to exist in your own relationship. You're allowed to talk about your day. You're allowed to ask your boyfriend how he's doing without being told you're exhausting." I felt my cheeks heat. "Maybe I am too much, though," I said quietly. "I talk about feelings a lot. I process verbally. It's what I do for work. Maybe that's genuinely draining for someone who's not built like that." He shook his head. "That sounds like something someone taught you to believe because it benefits them, not because it's true." I laughed it off, changed the subject, but his words burrowed in next to Caleb's. That night, lying awake again in Caleb's bed, I stared at the soft glow of his air purifier and did something I'm almost embarrassed to admit. I opened the Notes app on my phone and started a new document. At the top I typed, "You exhaust me. Times he's said it." Underneath, I created 3 columns. Date and time, what I was doing, exact words he used. My thumb hovered over the screen for a long moment. It felt ridiculous, obsessive, like proving Caleb right. But another part of me, the part that writes case notes and incident reports all day, whispered, "Document it. If you're really the problem, the pattern will show up. If you're not, that will show up too." So I typed in the last few incidents I could remember, only 4 or 5 to start. Then I locked my phone, tucked it under my pillow, and stared into the darkness. For the first time, a tiny, uneasy thought stirred in my chest. What if I'm not the exhausting one at all? I didn't plan for it to become a project. At first, it was just a handful of notes typed half-heartedly in bed, my eyes gritty with exhaustion. But the thing about me is, once I start documenting, I don't really know how to stop. It's part of the job. If something happens with a kid at the center, a meltdown, a disclosure, a fight, you write it down. Date, time, what happened, who said what. Over time, patterns appear. I guess I needed to see if there was a pattern in my own life. The next time it happened was 3 days after I made that first note. It was a Thursday evening. I'd just finished telling Caleb that I'd be late next week because of a support group training. I kept it short, clinical, no details. Then I asked, "How's the logo for the coffee place going?" Did they pick the hand-lettered version? He exhaled sharply. Nat, can we not do this right now? You're exhausting me with the 20 questions. My stomach clenched, but my face stayed neutral, trained social worker calm. Okay, I said softly. Yeah, sure. That night, in the bathroom with the shower running just for cover, I opened my notes again. Date, time. Thursday, 8:12 p.m. What I was doing. Asked about his project. 1 follow-up question. What he said. You're exhausting me with the 20 questions. Can we not? It felt petty. It also felt clarifying. Over the next 3 weeks, the list grew, not because I wanted it to, because it kept happening. Sometimes it was predictable, like when I talked about my day for more than 5 minutes. I can't listen to all this heavy stuff every night, he'd say, massaging his temples. Your job is important, but it drains me. You don't have to unload on me. It's exhausting. Other times, it made absolutely no sense. One Sunday afternoon, we were on the couch, watching some ridiculous reality show. A contestant said something so dumb, I burst out laughing. An honest belly laugh I hadn't felt in a while. Caleb flinched, like I'd shouted in his ear. God, Nat, even your laugh is exhausting, he muttered. Do you have to be so loud? I froze mid-laugh, the sound dying in my throat. Later, I wrote it down. Date time, sun, 3:37 p.m. What I was doing, laughing at a joke on TV. What he said. Even your laugh is exhausting. By the end of 3 weeks, my silly little note had turned into a full-blown spreadsheet. I'd transferred it from my phone to my laptop because the list was getting too long. 17 rows. 17 times in 21 days that he'd told me I was exhausting him. I stared at the number for a long time. 17 sounded clinical, abstract. But when I looked down the rows at the specifics, it felt like being slowly erased in slow motion. I scrolled, reading each line. Asked how his day was. Talked about my day for more than 5 minutes. Tried to comfort him when he looked upset. Suggested we go see a movie. Sat in the same room in silence. Made a joke. Laughed. Said, I miss you, after he'd been gone all weekend. Different actions, same verdict. You exhaust me. I spent almost an hour trying to find the common thread in my behavior. Did I talk too much? Ask too many questions? Was my timing off? My tone? Was I choosing the wrong moments? If this were a case at work, I'd be looking for triggers, clear cause and effect, but nothing lined up. Sometimes I was initiating conversation. Sometimes I was responding. Sometimes I was just existing near him. Finally, frustrated, I pushed my chair back and paced my bedroom, running a hand through my hair. There had to be something tying the moments together. What if it wasn't me? The thought landed with a thud. I sat back down and added a 4th column to the spreadsheet. What was going on in Caleb's life before? I felt a little crazy, like some obsessive detective in a bad drama. But still, I went back through my calendar, my messages with him, little things I remembered him complaining about. And slowly a different pattern emerged. The night I'd asked about the yoga studio logo, he'd gotten an email that morning saying the invoice for another client was processing for the 3rd week in a row. The time he said my questions were exhausting, he'd spent the day arguing with a printer over color accuracy and missed a deadline. The afternoon he snapped at me for asking if he was okay. He'd just checked his bank account and realized 2 clients still hadn't paid, rent was due, and his savings were thinner than he'd like. The day he told me my laugh was exhausting, he'd gotten a passive-aggressive message from a client demanding just a few more tweaks without mentioning additional payment. The weekend I told him I missed him after he'd gone to visit his mom, he'd spent 3 days listening to her criticize his career path and his inconsistent income. Row after row, I filled in the 4th column. Client rejected concepts. Mom made snide comment. Anxiety about money. Woke up tired and irritable. Traffic jam made him late. I sat back and stared. Every single time. Every time I was exhausting, something stressful had happened to him earlier that day. Sometimes major, sometimes minor, but always there. His own bad mood, his own anxiety, his own frustration. And then me, conveniently nearby. I rubbed my thumb over the trackpad, scrolling up and down as if the pattern might disappear if I looked away. This isn't about you being too much, Alex said when I finally showed him. We were in our kitchen again, my laptop between us, the cheap overhead light making everything look a little harsher than it already was. Alex scanned the spreadsheet, his lips pressing into a tight line as he read. You documented all this? He asked. Don't judge me, I muttered. I know it looks insane. He shook his head. No, it looks like data. He tapped the screen. Look at this. Every time he says you're exhausting, he's already worked up about something else. You're not the cause. You're the release valve. That makes me feel like a punching bag, I said, my throat tight. He gave me a sad half smile. Yeah, that's kind of what this looks like. I swallowed. Maybe I'm reading into it. Maybe... Natalie, his voice softened. If this were one of your kids' parents and you saw a pattern like this, what would you say? That shut me up. I knew exactly what I'd say. I just didn't know how to say it to myself. For a few days after that, I tried to hold the information and still function like normal. I didn't confront Caleb. I didn't wave the spreadsheet in his face. I just watched. There was this hollow space inside me now, where the question used to be, am I too much? It was slowly being replaced with a different one. Why does he need me to believe that? One evening, about 3 weeks into my data collection, I stayed late at the center. A girl I work with had finally opened up about something big, and I wasn't going to rush her because the clock said 5:00 p.m. By the time I got home, Caleb had already texted that he was tired and going to bed early. No, how was your day? No invitation to come over. I decided to give him space. We barely spoke the next day either. A few casual texts, a heart reaction to a meme, light, non-exhausting, carefully measured. I kept telling myself that this is what he said he wanted. Less intensity, less emotional weight. So I turned my emotional volume down to almost zero. The following evening, as I was prepping pasta in Alex's kitchen, my phone buzzed on the counter. Caleb, I'm exhausted. You've been a lot lately. I need space. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, staring at the words. I scrolled up through our chat. 3 days worth of messages. A meme I sent. His LOL. My, how's the logo coming? His fine. My, hope you get some rest tonight. A heart reaction. That was it. I hadn't seen him in person in almost 48 hours. I hadn't talked about my feelings. I hadn't brought up work. I hadn't asked too many questions. I'd done everything right, or at least everything smaller. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I typed. What did I do? We haven't really talked the last couple of days. The typing bubble popped up, disappeared, popped up again. It's not about anything you did specifically. It's just the energy of our relationship. It's exhausting right now. The energy of our relationship. I read it 3 times. It felt like he'd managed to blame me and everything else at the same time without pinning anything down. I set the phone down and pulled my laptop closer, opening the spreadsheet. Date, time, what I was doing, what he said, what was going on in his life. My cursor blinked in the empty row below. What I was doing, barely interacting for 48 hours. What he said, you've been a lot lately. I need space. The energy of our relationship is exhausting. I stared at the last column thinking, what was going on in his life? A few minutes later, as if on cue, Instagram served me one of his stories, a boomerang of his screen with the caption, "Client forgot to pay again." Love that for me. There it was. Another stressful thing. Another bad day. Another time I magically transformed into the problem. I felt something in me go very, very still. For the first time, instead of wondering how to be less, I let myself ask a different question. If he's exhausted by my very existence, even when I'm barely there, what am I still doing here? I didn't know life could split cleanly into before and after in a single phone call. It was a Tuesday morning. Portland gray, drizzling, one of those days where the sky looks colorless. I was making coffee, standing barefoot in the kitchen, half awake, when my phone rang. My brother's name. I smiled, ready to tease him for calling so early. But the second I heard his voice, hoarse, strangled, I knew something was wrong. Natalie, Dad's gone. Everything after that came in fragments. My hands shaking so badly the mug shattered on the floor. Me whispering, "What? What?" over and over, like the word might rearrange itself into something less impossible. My brother crying, apologizing, explaining. Sadie, my dad's golden retriever, howling in the background. A massive heart attack, no warning. 58 years old. He'd been healthy. He'd just retired. He had plans. He had everything. I called Caleb immediately. My voice wasn't even a voice anymore, more like broken air. He picked up, alarmed, and I could barely form the words. My dad, Caleb, he's gone. He's gone. He told me to breathe. Told me he was coming. And he did. He showed up at my door within 20 minutes, wrapped his arms around me, let me sink to the floor with him. For the first few hours, he said all the right things. I'm here, whatever you need. I'm so sorry, Nat. I cried into his shirt until it was wet. He held me. A part of me thought, okay, this is the real him. When it matters, he's here. He won't turn away from this. I clung to that thought like a life raft. The trip home. My flight home left the next morning. I barely slept. Caleb drove me to the airport, kissed my forehead, squeezed my hand. "Text me when you land, okay? I'm here for you," he said. I nodded, grateful. But once I got home, everything blurred. Mom collapsed into my arms at the door. My brother and I made 1,000 decisions we never imagined making. Funeral home, cremation or burial, the obituary, the service, the photos. I answered phone calls from relatives while Mom sobbed in the next room. Caleb texted here and there, small check-ins, nothing deep. I didn't expect deep, he wasn't there, and I was overwhelmed. Still, part of me hoped he was waiting for the moment I got back. Just waiting to catch me when the adrenaline ran out. Returning to Portland. When I finally got back 3 days later, I'd cried so much my skin felt raw. I went straight from the airport to Caleb's place. I didn't want to be alone. I didn't want to walk into my apartment and see Dad's favorite mug on my counter from his last visit. Caleb opened the door with a soft smile. He hugged me. It felt less grounding than I'd imagined, but I told myself I was just numb. He'd ordered Thai food. We ate quietly, the clink of forks sounding weirdly loud in his apartment. After dinner, I started talking, tentatively at first, about the memorial plans. How Mom couldn't stop shaking. How my brother kept disappearing into the garage because he didn't want us to see him cry. How surreal it felt that Dad's shoes were still by the door, but he was gone. Caleb nodded. "Yeah, that sounds really hard." His knee bounced under the table. I pushed on, not because I wanted to dump everything on him, but because I needed connection. I needed to not carry this alone for 1 second. "My mom just kept saying she didn't get to say goodbye," I whispered. "She keeps blaming herself for not waking up earlier. I wish I knew how to help her." "Natalie," Caleb said suddenly, setting his fork down. The metal clinked like a warning. I looked up. His face had that familiar tightness I recognized too well. "I'm sorry," he said, "but I can't do this right now." Do what?" I asked, stunned. "This," he gestured vaguely. "All this heavy grief stuff, it's a lot. It's exhausting me." I stared at him. My brain refused to process the words. "My dad died," I said quietly, 3 days ago. "I know," he said, frustrated, "and I'm sorry for your loss. I really am. But you're coming in with this huge emotional weight, and I can't take that on. It's not fair for you to expect me to be your therapist." My mouth went dry. "I'm not asking for a therapist," I managed. "I just need support. I need you." He rubbed his eyes. "Natalie, I have my own stuff going on. I can't absorb all of this. You're exhausting me. Even when you're trying to cope, it's just too much." Too much. A phrase I'd heard 1,000 times. But never like this. Never when my heart was split open and I was holding the pieces together with shaking hands. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. Something inside me just shut down. "Okay," I whispered. I need to go." He shrugged helplessly. "Do what you need to do." I walked out. No coat. No bag. Just walked straight into the cold night and kept walking because stopping meant falling apart. Alex. An hour later, I ended up at Alex's door. He took one look at me, my red eyes, my trembling hands, and pulled me inside without a word. I sat on the couch, telling him everything in broken pieces, when I repeated the sentence, "You're exhausting me. Even your grief is too much." Alex's face changed. He went still, sharp, protective in a way that startled me. "Natalie," he said quietly, "that is one of the most messed up things I've ever heard. Your dad died. You needed comfort, and he made it about him?" "He says I put too much emotional pressure on him," I said, picking at the seam of a pillow. "Maybe I do. Maybe—" "No!" Alex cut in firmly. "No. This is not normal. This is not your fault. I don't even have a word for how selfish that is." I pressed my palms over my eyes, willing myself not to collapse. He sat beside me and nudged my shoulder gently. "You don't have to be small here," he whispered. Something in me cracked. For the first time since Dad died, I let myself sob. Hard, ugly, real. Alex didn't tell me I was too much. He didn't flinch. He didn't sigh. He didn't shrink away. He just stayed. The text. The next morning, while I was still at Alex's, my phone buzzed. "Caleb," I braced myself. "I'm sorry if I was insensitive last night, but you can't expect me to be your only support system. It exhausts me. Maybe you should see a therapist." I stared at the screen. He wasn't wrong about the therapist part. I wanted one. Needed one. But the message wasn't about my healing. It was about him dodging discomfort. I read it again, the words, "It exhausts me," glowing like a bruise. Alex was making breakfast, humming off key. The apartment smelled like burnt toast. I quietly picked up my phone, opened my browser, and searched for therapists in my area. I walked into Dr. Elise Jones's office on Monday afternoon, feeling like my bones were made of glass. It had been 6 days since Caleb told me my grief was too much. 6 days of moving through life as if underwater. 6 days of replaying every moment with him, wondering what I'd done wrong, and then wondering why that was my first instinct at all. Dr. Jones's office was warm. Soft yellow lamps, a fiddle leaf fig in the corner, tissues within reach, but not too close. Everything arranged to feel safe without feeling staged. "Hi, Natalie," she said with a calm, grounded smile. "I'm glad you're here." I sat down on her sofa, hands clasped so tightly my knuckles went white. She asked where I wanted to start, and suddenly it all poured out, not in a tidy, chronological way, but in fragments. "My dad died suddenly," I said. 3 days later, Caleb told me my grief was exhausting. But that wasn't new. He's been saying, "You exhaust me," for months. I thought I was the problem. I made a spreadsheet, 19 incidents. I laughed weakly. I know how that sounds. She didn't laugh. She didn't flinch. "Why did you start the spreadsheet?" she asked gently. "Because I needed to see if I was actually doing something wrong," I whispered. "I needed data. I needed proof that I wasn't too much." The words hung there, raw, vulnerable. Dr. Jones nodded, like she'd been expecting them. "May I ask," she said carefully, "who taught you that being too much was even a possibility?" My chest tightened. There it was, my mother's voice echoing across decades. "You're exhausting me, Nat. I can't deal with your emotions today." I swallowed hard. My mom struggled with depression. A lot. Growing up, I learned to shrink myself so she wouldn't unravel. Dr. Jones didn't interrupt, didn't pity me, just listened. So when Caleb started saying it, I continued, it felt familiar, like muscle memory. She leaned forward slightly. "Natalie," she said softly, "what you're describing is emotional parentification." The term hit me like a jolt. You were taught very early that it was your job to manage your mother's emotions, to prevent her from breaking. That's a burden no child should carry. You weren't allowed to be a child. You were the emotional adult in the room. I blinked rapidly, vision blurring. "And Caleb," she continued, "has stepped neatly into the role your mother once occupied. Not consciously, necessarily, but he's repeating the same dynamic, making you responsible for his emotional state, blaming you for his discomfort, and punishing you for expressing your own needs." My voice cracked. I thought I was helping him, supporting him. I thought that's what love was. She shook her head. "Love is mutual. This is one-sided. He has conditioned you to believe that your emotions are burdens. That's not partnership, it's emotional abuse." The word abuse sucked all the air from my lungs. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, suddenly aware of how numb I'd become. She continued, "You keep asking, am I too much? But the real question is, why is the threshold for what he can handle so low?" That was the crack that did it. The tears came fast and silent, like a dam breaking. Dr. Jones passed me a tissue. "Tell me about the spreadsheet." So I did. I told her about each row, each date, each "you exhaust me" that had carved a small wound. How the pattern wasn't in my behavior, but in his stress levels. She listened intently, then said, "It's textbook emotional displacement. He offloads his stress by shifting the blame onto you. Every time he feels overwhelmed, he needs you to be the problem, because then he doesn't have to look inward." A quiet horror bloomed in my chest, all the pieces of the last year falling into place. His tension, his silence, his blame, his need for me to be less, less, less. She leaned back slightly. "Natalie, I want to ask something delicate. Do you want to continue in this relationship?" My breath caught. I hadn't expected the question so soon, but the answer rose in my throat instantly. Not a thought, but a knowing. "I don't think I can," I whispered. "Why?" "Because if he can't handle me grieving my father, then what happens the next time life knocks me down? Or when I have a bad day? Or when I need comfort? I can't live shrinking myself just to keep him stable. I'm disappearing." Dr. Jones nodded once, a gentle affirmation. "And you deserve to exist at your full size," she said. "Even in love. Especially in love." I cried again. Not out of sadness this time, out of relief. Someone finally said the thing I'd been afraid to think. We spent the rest of the session grounding myself, making a practical plan, mapping out emotional safety. She didn't tell me what to do. She helped me discover I already knew. By the end, I felt not strong, not yet, but supported, aligned. Before I left, she said, "It will feel wrong to choose yourself at first. That's conditioning. But choosing yourself is not abandoning someone else. It's ending a dynamic that was harming you." Those words stayed with me all the way home. The spreadsheet printed. 3 days later, I printed the spreadsheet. Seeing it on paper, rows of dates and reasons and moments I'd shrunk myself, felt like reading someone else's case file. Someone hurting, someone I wanted to protect, someone who painfully was me. I slid the papers into a folder, took a breath, and texted Caleb, "We need to talk. Coffee at 4?" He replied instantly, "Sure." I stared at the screen, my heart steady for the first time in months. This wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be an ending. But endings, real endings, are sometimes the beginning of finally coming home to yourself. Caleb chose the coffee shop where we'd had our third date, because of course he did. The one with mismatched furniture and cold brew that tasted like battery acid. The place where he once told me, "You feel like someone I could build a life with." Life has a dark sense of humor. I arrived early, folder in hand, heart surprisingly steady. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't rehearsing excuses. I wasn't trying to predict his mood so I could step into the right emotional shape. For the first time in a long time, I was just me. Raw, grieving, exhausted, but present. Caleb came in 5 minutes late, hair slightly messy, like he wanted to look effortlessly troubled. He gave me a half smile and slid into the seat across from me. "Hey," he said gently, "how have you been holding up?" A question that would have meant everything a month ago now felt like a prop. "I'm okay," I said, "not untrue, just incomplete." He nodded, waiting for the usual flood of explanations I used to give. I didn't offer any. His smile faltered. "So you wanted to talk?" he asked, fingers tapping anxiously on the table. "Yes," I said. "I think we need to break up." He blinked, like the words didn't make sense in English. "Wait, what?" "Natalie, no. I know things got intense lately, but..." "Break up?" He reached forward slightly, palms open. "Is this about what I said last week?" I apologized. I said I was sorry if it came off insensitive. I took a breath, calm, anchored. "It's not about one thing you said," I replied. "It's about a pattern, one I can't unsee anymore." His jaw twitched. "Pattern?" I slid the folder across the table. "I've been documenting the moments when you told me I was exhausting." He opened it, scanning the pages. I watched his face shift, confusion, then irritation, then something like indignation. "You tracked me?" he snapped. Natalie, this is obsessive, controlling, creepy, honestly." "I didn't track you," I said quietly. "I tracked me, my behavior, what I was doing each time you said I was exhausting. Because I genuinely thought something was wrong with me." He looked away, scoffing. "There is something wrong if you think keeping a spreadsheet of our conversations is normal." I didn't flinch. Not this time. "Look at it," I urged gently. 17 times in 3 weeks. I wanted to know what I was doing wrong, and the answer is nothing. He flipped through the pages, shaking his head. "That's not fair," he said. "You're twisting things. You know I've been stressed. You know my clients have been impossible. You know my mom's been..." "Exactly," I interrupted softly. "Your stress, your clients, your mom, your anxiety. Every time you felt overwhelmed, you took it out on me by calling me exhausting." His lips parted, but no words came out. "You made me responsible for every emotional dip you had," I continued. "And I tried. God, I tried so hard to fix it, to be less, to anticipate your moods, to shrink myself so you wouldn't feel drained." He looked hurt, wounded in a way that almost pulled at me. Almost. "I didn't ask you to shrink," he said. "You didn't have to," I replied. "You trained me to. Every time you called me too much for caring, too much for asking, too much for being human. I learned to take up less space." My voice didn't crack, not once. Caleb pressed his hand to his forehead. "I was going through a lot too, Natalie. You know that. You're acting like I'm a villain." I shook my head, or maybe it was a sad sort of nod. "You're not a villain, Caleb," I said softly. "You're just someone who can't handle their own emotions unless someone else absorbs them. And I can't be that person anymore. Not now. Not ever again." His eyes sharpened. "This is really happening?" "It is." He leaned back, scoffing bitterly. "So you're abandoning me, just like everyone else." That line, his favorite, didn't land this time. "I'm not abandoning you," I said firmly. "I'm letting go of a dynamic that's been hurting both of us. You need to learn how to sit with your own feelings without making someone else the problem." He slammed the folder shut. People turned to look. He lowered his voice, embarrassed. I can't believe you're doing this when you know I'm struggling, he whispered fiercely. And I can't believe you told me my grief for my father was exhausting, I replied. Quiet, steady, final. His face fell. He had nothing left to throw. I stood gathering my things. I hope you get the support you need, I said. But it can't be from me. I walked out. The air outside was cold, bright. I didn't look back. The first week. Leaving someone doesn't end the relationship. Not really. The echoes linger. The first few days were brutal. I kept wondering if he'd eaten, if he was okay, if I had been too harsh, if I should check in. The conditioning whispered, "You're responsible for his feelings." But Dr. Jones's voice whispered back, "You're not." Alex was my anchor. He made me tea. He distracted me with bad movies. He told me, repeatedly, "You are not going back there. Not after everything." I blocked Caleb's number, not out of anger, out of self-preservation. He would have pulled me back with guilt, fear, and just enough softness to make me question myself again. I couldn't risk it. 3 weeks later. Grief is still a weight I carry everywhere. My father's absence is an ache that settles in the chest, low and constant. I cry more than I expect to, sometimes at night, sometimes in the middle of a grocery store. But I'm not shrinking myself while I grieve. That alone feels like a miracle. My brother calls me almost every night. Mom and I are learning to talk without me taking responsibility for her sadness. It's messy, but it's real. At work, one of the kids made me a crooked beaded bracelet with my initials. I haven't taken it off. It reminds me that my empathy, the trait Caleb weaponized, is a gift to someone. Alex comes home one evening with takeout and says, "You're more like yourself every day." I didn't realize how far I'd drifted from myself until I started coming back. I keep going to therapy. Dr. Jones tells me healing from parentification is like learning to walk again. You don't need to hold everyone together, she reminds me. Sometimes the most healing thing you can do is simply exist. The choice to live full-sized. One night while journaling, I write something without thinking. I was never too much. I was just with someone who needed me to be less. The words sit heavy and true. A month after the breakup, I walk alone through downtown Portland at dusk. The sky is lavender. A street musician is playing something soft. A breeze moves through my hair. For the first time in a year, I feel like I take up the exact amount of space I'm meant to. No shrinking, no apologizing, no bracing for someone to sigh at my emotions. I whisper it aloud to no one and everyone. I am not too much. The city hums around me in quiet agreement. My fingers hovered over one listing. Dr. Elise Jones, grief counseling, trauma-informed, relationships. I pressed call. My voice shook as I said, "Hi, I'd like to schedule an appointment as soon as possible." Because something inside me had shifted, just a hair, just barely, but once a crack appears in a wall, it never really closes again.